Morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending where you are. I am Maria Palombini, and I lead the Healthcare and Life Science practice at the IEEE SA. And joining me is my collaborator, Florence Hudson, who is Executive Director of the Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub. So today we're here for our second edition of our workshop series entitled Privacy, Ethics, and Trust in Connected Healthcare. So as you all know, and Florence is going to go into more detail about why we've put together this 5-part series this year, but this is our second edition. We've had a very successful first edition that came out on 24th of February, available on demand. And also we had our report out just published on the website as well, which I believe you can access by visiting our website, or maybe you might have received one of our communications. But we're going to do the exact same thing again today. We're going to have great conversation. We're going to have some interaction, some ideation, and then we'll produce another report and make this event available on demand as well. So with that, just a little bit for you all, I just want to share with you. Most of you may be familiar with IEEE, and this presentation will be available for download as well. As you know, our core mission is looking at advancing technology for humanity. We are a global organization with more than 400,000 members strong. We're more than 100 years old. We're in 160 countries. We all do many conferences, as you can see, and we produce a lot of technical documents and obviously standards. So as far as our portfolio at the IEEE Standards Association, our work naturally is in the area of industry connections, which is where we incubate great ideas and see how we can nurture them into their next evolution, whether they're technical standards, conformity assessment projects, or just to overall a great output report on what the industry needs to do to sort of accept and adopt certain types of technologies and applications. Naturally, standardization, we have membership, and our registries are an important aspect of unique identifiers, standardized unique identifiers, and so on and so forth. And my team, I lead the healthcare life science practice, but we have practices in mobility, energy, telecommunications, connectivity, and foundational technologies, and this will continue to grow as well. So what do we do at the healthcare life science practice? And this is why Florence and I collaborate so well. We align ourselves with organizations, individuals, volunteers, entities who share a common aligned interest, which is how do we improve the global standard quality of life through giving access to affordable healthcare and medicines. How do we support innovation and improve overall wellness and societal outcomes? And how do we enable innovation through open and standardized means? So our goals are ambitious, they are global, and they're designed so that we can actually help everyone. That's why we have so many global volunteers joining our efforts. So with that, I asked Florence to come and share with you about the great work they're doing at the Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub.
Thank you very much, Maria. And it's really delightful to partner with IEEE. And I actually work with IEEE a lot as a volunteer. And thank you, Maria, as always, for your teamwork. It's great to be co-sponsoring this global Connected Healthcare Cybersecurity Workshop Series with you. So at the Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub, we're one of 4 big data innovation hubs in the United States, funded by the U.S. National Science Foundation. And we're a community convener, collaboration hub, and a catalyst for data science innovation. So Maria and I are both talking about innovation. We're focused on innovation leveraging data science. And this is to address real-world challenges through translational data science, making sure we're actually transitioning what we do to practice. And our activities align across 4 focus areas: education, data literacy, health, urban rural communities, and responsible data science. And so this Connected Healthcare Cybersecurity Workshop Series actually aligns very well with 2 of our 4 focus areas, the health focus area and the responsible data science focus area. So you can learn more about us at nebigdatahub.org/about.
Awesome. So really, with mostly Florence's hard work, she's assembled an awesome planning board, advisory board, a planning team. She's harnessed the enthusiasm and passion of many great students at Columbia University to help us with this program. And so we want to say a special thank you to everyone, also the students who are helping us today, especially in our breakout sessions, for everybody's time, their expertise, and their interest to help us bring this initiative forward. So with that, maybe Florence, you just want to talk a little bit about why we've decided to embark on this initiative and what we're trying to do at the end of it all.
Absolutely. So Maria and I started working together on this a few years ago. And actually in 2016, we actually had a workshop between IEEE, NSF, and a few other organizations on end-to-end trust and security for the Internet of Things, and healthcare was one of the focus areas. So that grew into an effort, a pre-standards effort on clinical IoT data and device interoperability with TIPS, a term that stands for trust, identity, privacy, protection, safety, and security. I ended up doing a paper for Maria, and then we created a whole working group, and a number of our working group leaders are here with us today. So it's an IEEE and Underwriters Laboratories joint standards working group on clinical IoT data and device interoperability with TIPS. So the real challenge here is to address the security, privacy, ethics, safety, protection challenges in connected healthcare. So our plan is to develop a roadmap, including standards to improve connected healthcare cybersecurity through these 5 workshops. And it's a continuum. The first one in February was around global connected healthcare cybersecurity risks and a potential roadmap. This is our privacy, ethics, and trust in connected healthcare workshop. And as we know, security and privacy are 2 sides of the same coin, or all part of the same prism. Our next workshop in June will be on data and device identity validation interoperability. Then in September, connected healthcare integrated systems, bringing all this together. And then we plan on having a technology and policy considerations workshop in November. So what we do is through each workshop, we get the output from that workshop. Our incredible student Macy, who's on the line with us today, puts these reports together from us from the Google Doc breakout session output. And we take that output and we bring it to the next workshops with us. I expect that some of the things we talk about today are going to be important for the technology and policy workshop later this year. So this is a continuum, and it could extend into the future. So we're really delighted that you're here for this journey.
Excellent. I have nothing further to say because I think Florence encapsulated all of it so well. Okay, so with that, one of the questions we often get, and I'm going to let Florence really preface this, but what is connected healthcare? And I think from our end, there's probably thousands of different definitions. But Florence, maybe you want to instigate what our audience should be thinking about a little bit.
Yes, thank you very much, Maria. And the really important thing here is that you're a part of this journey with us because you're here. And so your voice counts and your thinking counts. It's very important that we listen to what we're all experiencing, especially from different places around the world. So for connected healthcare, it could mean a number of things. You could be thinking about a wearable, a clinical Internet of Things device. The wearable talks to another device. Okay, so that's connected healthcare. The human is wearing the wearable, and then a doctor tries to get into the information. Well, that's connected healthcare. The data might flow through to an EHR or an EMR or someplace else. Or you might move to a different place around the planet and you're in a connected healthcare environment, and you want to make sure you still have the security and privacy you expect. So all of these things can be part of connected healthcare. We like to keep the human in the middle because we're trying to improve healthcare. And then think of the humans, the devices, the systems, the processes that could be at risk that are part of the situation. So that's really what we think about with connected healthcare. But we don't all have to agree on the exact pieces of it. We'll each come to this from a different perspective. That's one of the reasons we have different breakout sessions. We have, trust and identity technology solutions. We have ethical considerations. We have privacy by design. We have patient-informed consent, all important parts of this. And we really look forward to your thoughts to help us determine what type of standards and activities we should create to address the challenges in connected healthcare.
So maybe potentially we even see a standard around lexicon for that. Just that's my nature. I had to think of it that way.
And now that you said that, Maria, I'd like to add one thing. So in our P2933 working group, for those of us geeks who speak IEEE in clinical IoT data and device interoperability with TIPS, we're continually saying to each other, we may be creating new terms, right? Because we may be looking at new issues and new solutions that people haven't really worked all the way through yet. So we give ourselves the freedom to think that way. And I'd like to give us all that freedom today and into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see the same thing in our telehealth industry connections program, the same thing with telehealth, telemedicine, virtual care, digital health, mobile care. There's a whole bunch of things, and they're starting to ruminate and think about in those areas as well. So that's what we're doing with the transformation of healthcare in a digital world. So we got to go with it. So with that, everybody, I'm sharing with you our agenda today. We're getting through opening remarks. Up subsequently is our awesome panel session on the global perspectives on this concept of ethics, trust, and privacy. Then after the panel session, we're going to go into the interactive breakout. And we have our facilitators who are going to help guide the conversation and work with our audience to, come up with ideas and address these 4 areas to identify and discuss. Then we ask everybody to come back and share what are some of the ideas, the concepts that were discussed, and how we can move maybe some things moving forward. We follow up with our next steps. And then finally, as you can see, we're going to introduce workshop 3 just conceptually. That event is in June, and hopefully we'll go on from there. But before I start the panel, I just want to let you know, based on feedback we got from session 1, our attendees wanted to continue the conversation beyond the event. So what we have done is opened up our Slack channel for attendees to come after the event and interact with each other in a way to, maybe there's a topic that needs further delineation or someone's more interested about it or whatever it might be. So Florence and I will definitely be there live on the Slack channel after the event. We hope you all come join us. You can definitely just scan the QR code or copy this short URL and you can get into our WAMI Slack channel, and just make sure you join the Global Connected Health Cybersecurity channel, because that's where all the participants from the prior event, this event, and hopefully future events will be interacting. So with that, I would like to kick off our main panel session. I will be your moderator today. I'm privileged to be introducing this awesome and diverse panel of experts. With us, we have Dr. Deborah Peel. She's founder and president of Patient Privacy Rights. We have Dr. Deepak Khalra from the European Institute for Innovation Through Health Data. We have Shanil Pathak, CEO and co-founder of Zoe Insights, which I believe his company was just renamed to Zemplo. We have Dr. Julia Stornovich, assistant professor at New York University, and we have Dr. Jeanette Wing from Columbia University. So first of all, thank you, panelists, for joining us today. I think I'm excited to hear what you're going to say, and I hope our audience gets to enjoy it as well. So with that, I'd like to ask Dr. P, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to really introduce their work, some of the great things they've done, some of their perspectives on this topic. So it's kind of like set the field for all of you. And then we're going to get into some core questions for each of them, followed by your questions for them as well. So I invite all of you, as we're going through this, to please add your questions to the chat as we start going through this process. So let's start with Dr. Peel. Please share with our audience your great work.
My great work. Well, first of all, it's an honor to be invited to speak with you. I am not an engineer, but my father was a winner of the von Neumann Prize, and so I do understand a lot about technology. But I've spent my life, 43 years in practice as a physician, as a clinician, as a psychiatrist and Freudian analyst. And then I spent the last 3.5 years of my life dealing with the slow death of a close family member. And I have a lot to tell about you from what the patient perspective is and the physician perspective is in medicine. And I can tell you that even though Austin, where I live, is the 11th biggest city in the nation, the state of the depreciation of ethics and privacy and electronic health records has really created a terrible situation. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Let's start with the foundation of where ethics became depleted. Could you do the next slide for me, please? Okay, this is the foundational slide I'd like for you to think about. Privacy was actually eliminated from the HIPAA privacy rule in 2002 under President Bush. You can see the language right there from the federal regulations. The consent provisions are replaced with a new provision that provides regulatory permission for covered entities to use and disclose your protected health information for treatment, payment, and healthcare operations. Now, what does that mean? Treatment, payment, and healthcare operations covers the world. You can't think of any use of your data that doesn't fit into one of those three categories. We lost our right of control back then. Like I said, the consequences have been devastating. Next slide. I'm sure you all are aware of Shoshana Zuboff and her incredible book about the age of surveillance capitalism. But frankly, the US health industry, and I'm not even calling it medicine anymore, it's really a business, invented the theft and use of data without consent long before Facebook and Google were formed in 1998. So I discovered in the 1990s that the little pharmacy that we went to, to get our prescriptions, one day I walked in there and there was a computer behind the desk. And I asked the owner, what are you doing with this computer? And he said, well, we got free software from McKesson. And I knew what that meant. McKesson, people that you don't even know have information that can be used against you in things like discrimination based on the kind of drugs. So I, as a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, most mental health issues and addiction problems are very disturbing to other people, and it creates a lot of discrimination. So anyway, this has gone on for a long time. There's so many points I could make about what happened. Could I see the next slide? Thank you. The big thing is, I no longer think medicine is a science. You can read this. You read this slide. Obviously, math and physics are sciences, but U.S. medicine is now has been operating like a business for a very long time. For a very long time. We don't really know what systems are best because the root cause analysis is blocked by secrecy and business interests. We can't prove whose system is best for analyzing how to help people because everything is intellectual property and it's used for commercial exploitation. This is not science. The US healthcare system is operating like a business. And, I think these are the kinds of things that all patients are aware of. They're aware of this. And I would like to see the United States reform this science, because what we have now isn't science, it's business and marketing for various projects. But we don't really know whose systems are doing the best. We have to have open source solutions, and we have to have, particularly in healthcare, we can't have anything that's different than black boxes in airlines. Airlines fly everywhere, all over the place, and have very few deaths. Medicine has multiple deaths, but if you happen to be in an airplane and die, they can figure out what caused the problem that killed you. We don't have anything like that in medicine. More people die in medicine than you do in airplanes. We really need to turn this around and restore the privacy that's been stripped from us for a long time. And as Heinz von Forster's ethical imperative is, act so as to increase the number of choices, not to decrease them. Next slide, please. Clinical practice shouldn't in any way imply or force aggregation of your data. That's the Hippocratic Oath. That's why people can't trust us anymore. Patients can't trust doctors. just so you know it, the amount of bad data in EHR systems would shock you. People lie, people omit, and no one reconciles your records anymore because most physicians are in hourly positions and don't have time. So these are I'm a little behind, so I think you can read this if you want, but you get the idea. Pre-crime action is based on inferences. You probably know about LaTanya Sweeney when she found that people with ethnic names would get, have you got a ticket? You know, have you failed to pay for a ticket? And they come target you to try to get you to have a check to see if you've gotten some unpaid fine. Okay, so last place, we really need to unwind this unethical coercion and separate consent for data collections. Business and research and public health need to be separate entities. There are alternative data aggregation models, but in the end, we have to restore the human right to privacy if we want to ever be able to save people and become a science again. I have 2 more slides and they're just for you to look at later. You can just flip through them. The right to privacy, I would recommend reading what privacy really is. It's very clear and you can understand it because he doesn't talk legally. The last thing is a piece from the last slide, please, is about, came out just today in the Annals of Internal Medicine. You might want to look at this right now because these are coming from clinicians. We need to pay attention to doctors who work with patients and understand the consequences of the systems we have today. Thank you so much for letting me speak.
Well, thank you, Dr. Peel, and I greatly appreciate, I know you're doing some great work in some of the standards groups we do here at IEEE, but overall, a very holistic view on, let's call it the degradation of ethics and privacy in our healthcare system. So with that, I'd like to ask Shanil Pathak to share a little bit about the great work he's doing on the technology side to start getting to how do we, or some ways of rethinking how we can address some of these issues by empowering patients. So Shanil, do you have your slides ready?
Yeah, thank you, Maria.
Awesome.
Share my screen. Okay. Everybody can see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I'm just getting adjusted here. So as Maria said, Maria just mentioned, my name is Shanil Pathak. I'm from Alberta, Canada. My background is computer engineering by training. I'm a patient advocate, and also I have a digital health startup named Zamplo. Zamplo is a social enterprise. And I want to give you an example, or a real life example of the power of data access and control through lived experience. So when my wife was 35, she was misdiagnosed for over a year before we found out she had stage 4 lung cancer. And part of that delay was the fragmentation of our data. It was in multiple cities where we lived. So we didn't have a longitudinal data set to advocate for ourselves. So after that, we took control of our whole health data. And I think that's key, whole health data, which means it's your medical information. It could be your physio, it could be complementary care, mental health, etc. It's your whole health. And then we started analyzing that and seeing correlations. So she was given months to live and she lived over 5 years. And data was contributing to her living that long. We also leveraged the Canadian US health system, plays the strengths of both systems, which also means that our data cross borders. I'll give you an example of how we crowdsourced some of our data to influence our decisions. So in year 3, she had progression and brain metastasis, and she was put on a new treatment, which is just newly approved by Health Canada. Problem was there's no published data on the drug crossing the blood-brain barrier. And so our option was whole brain radiation. We didn't like that because of the impact of quality of life. And so we took it upon ourselves to become citizen scientists. So the first thing we did, because our question was, does this drug cross the blood-brain barrier? We're going to go out and find that information. We connect with people around the world who had the exact same profile, taking the same medication, and we asked them for their data. We asked them to share their results. And so we gave them a purpose for giving us their data, and in return, we promised back the outcomes. We then took the data, we structured it, I analyzed the data, and in conclusion, we found the drug did cross the blood-brain barrier. And these were for people who are on the clinical trial or on the drug currently in different countries. And so therefore, we declined the whole brain radiation. 1 month later, we had the MRI, and she had a complete response to the drug. There was no metastasis in the brain. 2 months later, we were in Bali. She lived over 18 months after that treatment with no cognitive decline. And this information we found 2 years before it was published by the pharmaceutical company. So that's kind of the power of that's a real example of data control, access, global exchange of data, and data for good. This methodology was published in the Journal of Thoracic Oncology. And at Zamplo, we are taking this methodology and we are giving people the ability to collect, analyze, and share their whole health data. We're applying this crowdsourcing methodology to scale it globally for any disease, any mental health, for anyone in the world. We are a social enterprise, so we don't sell the data. It's all subscription-based. But we're just taking lived experience and from one individual, and we think we could take this and scale it around the world for everybody, but still respect the privacy as well as using data for good. I appreciate inviting me here and into the panel. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Shanil. And as I think you all can see that not only this is a real world case study, but it's truly an inspiring sort of application of how do we use data to help ourselves have better health outcomes. So in the spirit of technology, this section of the panel session, I'd like to invite Dr. Jeanette Wing, who is at Columbia University. And I found her very inspiring when she talks about trust and artificial intelligence and technologies and data science. She comes with a very comprehensive perspective on the topic. So Dr. Wing, please share with our audience some of your insight and learnings and ways to help us out in this crazy new world of digital health transformation.
Thank you very much. And thank you to IEEE and the Northeast Big Data Hub for inviting me to be on this panel. Privacy research is one of my passions. And I also wanted to just take this opportunity to thank the Columbia students who are out there helping, because this is commencement week, and I know it's very busy for all of you, and congratulations to any of you who are graduating this week. So I have this big research agenda, which I call Trustworthy AI. Given that AI systems are going to be making more and more decisions, automated decisions for us, especially in the healthcare arena, I feel like we need to be careful about ensuring that customers, patients, and we can trust these systems. This is really an extension of decades of work going on in trustworthy computing, which I know IEEE is very much keen on, which includes security, privacy, safety, and so on. I think for trustworthy AI, there are new properties that are of interest, including robustness, fairness, interpretability, and properties and ethics, properties that AI systems are forcing computing professionals and developers to think about where we hadn't had to before. But more specifically to this panel, and especially given the past two presentations, I wanted to provide a little glimmer of hope in terms of privacy preserving technologies that are practical, that are scalable, that are actually used in industry today. These might sound esoteric, and that just means that the research community has to continue working hard at the engineering of these solutions to make them more practical, more scalable, and more applicable in all domains, including health. So I categorize these privacy preserving technologies into three buckets. One are cryptographic based techniques like secure multi-party computation and homomorphic encryption. The other is actually inspired by cryptography, but it's ended up to be more statistical based, and that's differential privacy, which many of you probably heard about because Census 2020 is purportedly going to use differential privacy when releasing microdata. And the third is hardware-based solutions where you have a secure processor, secure coprocessor that will allow you to put instructions into what's called a secure enclave and ensure that not even the operating system can see the unencrypted data. So I really wanted to make mention of these three buckets of technologies. A lot of work has been made in all of those technologies I mentioned, and you might be surprised to know that some of the cryptographic based technologies are really used by companies like Google and Microsoft and so on. So this is not just academic of academic interest and of small scale prototypes. So let me just close by saying I completely understand why patients, individuals should have the right to their data, their health data. It should be private to them. They should be able to control it. But if we are in a situation where it's too late or we can't go back to the norms we might like, there is obviously an advantage to aggregating patient data in a privacy preserving manner, to build machine learning models and AI systems that can take advantage of the big collection of data to build better predictors, better classifiers, to actually help the doctors diagnose and treat patients better. And in that situation, the main technical challenge is how can we combine all this data and preserve the privacy of the individual patients. And this is what I mean by exploring privacy preserving techniques like the ones I mentioned in order to do that. So you get ideally you get the best of both worlds. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Ring. I think it's very important that perspective that you bring for sure, especially from a research perspective. And I think we all can appreciate those insights. So with that, I would like to introduce our next panelist, Dr. Deepak Khalra. I think that he says things very carefully when he says our impact on societal trust is at hand. And I'd like for him to share, some of the insights and perspectives from the work he has been observing and doing.
Well, thank you very much. And thanks for inviting me to be in your panel and bringing a voice from the other side of the Atlantic, which I hope is complementary, but at times I suspect we will have differing perspectives, which will be exciting to explore together. So I look forward to the discussion. So just a quick personal bio for a few seconds. I started my life as a London-based general practitioner, a family doctor, thinking that's how I will spend my whole life and career. But foolishly, I fell in love with computers. That's a big mistake. And I got excited by the prospect of electronic health records, electronic health data. And in 1992, I jumped into the first European Commission funded project at the time on electronic health records. Found it so exciting, I eventually shifted and became an academic and eventually became a professor of health informatics at University College London. And 5 years ago, I jumped again because I felt that health data was a rather unsung hero. And with colleagues, we decided to create a brand new not-for-profit institute at European level that would focus on how to promote multi-stakeholder value from the trustworthy reuses and uses of health data. And that's now what I head up, and that's the hat I'm wearing today. So when we look at the uses of health data, the biggest issue that we see is health data is barely used at all. There's been an emphasis so far in the panel on the use of health data primarily to support the care of individuals. And as we know today, at least in Europe, I would say still today, your allergy list, if that was of importance, could not be accessible and used by a clinician you're seeing if you're away from your home base on a holiday or a business trip in Europe, even where we have already a lot of cohesion. We can't communicate allergies. So we don't have connectivity, continuity of care between hospitals, between general practice and hospitals remains challenging. But it's not the center of gravity of innovation, because mostly the problem with connecting healthcare at the individual level is about making better use of what we already have. We already have the standards, the technology exists. We're just very slow, and we have perverse incentives, which we could always discuss, which basically mean people don't buy interoperable systems and don't connect properly to look after patients as individuals very well. But the momentum in Europe that is really powerful right now is how can we enable trustworthy reuse of that data? COVID-19 has taught us across Europe that when we want to try and collect and learn as a group of countries, get the best possible insights we can so that we can inform public health strategies, we have very poor infrastructures and we have very poor mechanisms for sharing intelligence. The challenge is, how can we enable reuse of data? Europe is blessed by having perhaps today on the planet the most stringent data protection regulations, known as the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR. It is probably the tightest regulation that exists, and it safeguards the individual very powerfully. However, it has some gray areas where its provisions are a little imprecise, and that's to do with the reuse of data for research, whether it's for consent, which requires very explicit information so that an individual is very clear about how their data might be reused for research, but then doesn't permit wider reuse, data mining, knowledge discovery in areas that maybe were not anticipated when the consent was sought. So we've got the challenge that on the one side, we need to find a balance between how we can safeguard individuals. And in most cases, research has no interest in knowing who individuals are, but we need to prevent people in research from accidentally discovering who people are. So there is a need to make sure data protection is well implemented. And that is a combination of education, human measures, organizational measures, and technical measures. And they all have to be hung together, and they need to be coordinated so that they reinforce each other and are mutually complementary. But what we also know from a lot of public opinion surveys, over many years, is that if you can absolutely robustly anonymize data, which is itself a theoretical point, and guarantee that an individual can't be identified from data that's being reused, for example, in a research context, they remain interested. You do not have a groundswell of the public who say, if I can't be identified, I don't care. They do care. And so there is a need on top of data protection to look at other things that help to ensure that data, when they are reused, even in ways that protect privacy, are still in society's interest. And that is at the moment one of the biggest energy forces going on in Europe, is how do we define good uses of data? Can we do that by means of defining a set of purposes? And I've been involved in helping to develop candidate, but not in any way endorsed, white lists and blacklists, things you'd be happy for your data to be used for, almost certainly. Things the public, when you survey them, are very comfortable with, for example, related to surveys, related to safety. And then on the other side, things they wouldn't be comfortable with, organizations, etc. So that is where Europe currently is moving, and I hope we can enter some of that discussion today. Thanks.
Thank you, Deepak. And I'm very appreciative bringing the insight from Europe. I think it's really important for everyone to understand that this is a global challenge. Sometimes we tend to think of everything at home, but it's really important as well. So, and I'd like to definitely introduce our final panelist, Dr. Julia Stornovich, who I think has the most amazingly colorful and intriguing slides. When I read them, I couldn't help but just keep reading them. So I hope, I'm sure her presentation is just as delightful. So Julia, please share your slides and tell them a little bit about the great work you're doing.
Thank you very much for having me. Let me share my slides and I will do my very best to stay within the 5-minute time allocation here. So I'm Julia Stornovich. I'm an assistant professor of computer science and engineering and of data science at New York University. I also direct the newly established Center for Responsible AI at NYU. I come from the data management community within computer science and have been working to build an agenda in research, education, policy, and public engagement around responsible data science or responsible AI. What is responsible data science? It's the task of incorporating ethics and legal compliance, also privacy, of course, and trustworthiness that Jeanette and others spoke about, into the data science lifecycle. So as the speakers before me discussed, it's challenging to come up with solutions, technical or otherwise, to the many socio-legal technical problems that we face in healthcare and in other domains where we use data and algorithms to assist in decision-making. My point of view on this is that we need to work together to find a pragmatic middle ground between two harmful extremes depicted here. On the left, I'm depicting techno-optimism, and that is a belief that technology can single-handedly fix deep-seated societal problems like structural discrimination in access to healthcare, for example. And on the right is the other harmful extreme, and that is techno-bashing. And this is a belief that is also rampant that any attempt to operationalize ethics and legal compliance in algorithmic and data-driven systems will amount to fair washing, and so should be dismissed. One of the keywords that was used that is used very frequently in this domain, although I think it has not actually been used enough today, is bias. And this is a term that we use very often, but that remains poorly understood in the technical community and elsewhere. So I'd like to give a very quick interpretation of this term. In their seminal 1996 paper, Batya Friedman and Helen Nissenbaum identified 3 types of bias that can arise in computer systems, depicted here with a 3-headed dragon. Pre-existing, technical, and emergent is what the heads read. Pre-existing bias is independent of an algorithm itself or an algorithmic system, and it has its origins in society. Technical bias is introduced by the operation of the technical system, and it may exacerbate pre-existing bias. And finally, emergent bias arises in the context of use and may be present if a system was designed with different users in mind, or when social concepts shift over time, in part due to the way that we use these technical systems. And an important point is that to fight bias of any kind, we have to state our beliefs and assumptions explicitly and then build interventions, technical or otherwise, that are consistent with these stated beliefs. And I like to frame efforts to fight the bias dragon through the lens of data equity. And that is depicted here as a dark-skinned Brienne of Tarth from the Game of Thrones. And you can see that Brienne has 3 swords, each corresponding to a type of data equity or a facet of data equity that I'd like to discuss. The first here is representation equity. It refers to deviations between the data records and the world that the data is meant to represent, often with respect to historically disadvantaged groups. Access equity is concerned with having access to information, features, data, and models that are needed to evaluate and mitigate inequities. And finally, outcome equity refers to the downstream unanticipated consequences that are outside the direct control of the system. And here again, purely technical solutions want to do. So to chat very briefly about representation equity, as we're seeing time and again, data sets on which we rely to make decisions reflect societal biases, historical inequities in access to resources and opportunities. In the healthcare domain, representation equity is of immediate concern. Datasets lack information about entire demographic groups and about the effectiveness of diagnostics and of treatments for these groups. Something happened with my sharing just now. Oops.
Maybe try.
Are you seeing this again?
Yes, we
Sorry.
are.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So access equity, and I'll wrap up in just a minute, is concerned with having access to information, like I said, features, data, and models that are needed to evaluate and mitigate inequity. The point of view here that I like to take is primarily of mitigating technical bias, making sure that we're able to catch and correct the imperfections and distortions in the data as it travels through complex data science pipelines. A set of technologies that are very promising here and that people, including us, are working on is the use of privacy-preserving synthetic data generation and release to help address access inequities. And this is a set of techniques that is in the kind of broad portfolio of tools that Jeanette spoke about earlier. An important set of concerns is that incomplete choices during data modeling or data preparation can introduce systematic distortions in the data affecting performance. For example, we may systematically be guessing a person's age or gender or disability status incorrectly because these values are missing more frequently in some demographic groups than in others. And then these mistakes are carried through our entire data processing lifecycle and get amplified. And importantly, it's been documented that data quality issues such as missing or dirty data disproportionately impact members of historically disadvantaged groups. And so we risk compounding technical bias due to data representation with pre-existing bias for such groups. I'll skip this. And the last type of equity is outcome equity that I'd like to underscore. It's concerned with whether and how we can assess and mitigate problems, inequities that are outside the system's direct control. And for this, we need help of individuals being impacted, of patients, of members of the public at large. And here my thinking centers around this concept of a nutritional label that we should be using to interpret data sets, models, and model results to various stakeholders, including clinicians who are making decisions with the help of these tools and patients being impacted. And in summary here, I think that our disclosure mechanisms should be comprehensible, not complete, but rather short, simple, and clear and understandable. They should be consultative, providing actionable information to individuals, and they should enable comparisons between related products or processes, implying a standard. And of course, the effectiveness of disclosure mechanisms like a nutritional label depends on whether the recipient of that information understands what the equivalent of a calorie means. And for this, we need to scale up our education and public outreach efforts. And here I'm just going to leave you with a couple of pictures again of some comic books that I have been developing together with the very talented Fala Arif Khan. This is the more technical Data Responsibly comic book series. The first volume has been translated into, of course, it's in English and translated into Spanish and French. The second volume we are translating as we speak. And then we're also releasing comics for the general public that explain data, AI, and algorithmic decision-making in just a couple of weeks. So please stay tuned and thank you very much. And sorry that I'm over time.
No worries, no worries. I think you shared some really important research and insight, and I know that our audience really appreciates it. So we have about 5 or 6 minutes left before we go on to our our panel session, our breakout sessions, which are really highly interactive, and that's where we get to, I think, the working part of this part of the event. But you know, I want to just remind everybody we do have time for a couple questions. I would like to start with, we have one question for our audience that I would like to take for our members. I sent one out to the audience for you guys to nosh on and think about. But, you know, I have a question for our panelists. I'm going to ask each of them to maybe hopefully give a short answer. You know, I think the question is what are the ethical implications regarding a patient choosing not to worry about data privacy in order to focus on their health? Is that really necessary? So what the question is like, has it come down to, or is it required to exchange privacy for, trying to get better health by saying, make my data available everywhere. So maybe perhaps I'm going to start with Shanil on this one, because he kind of started to touch on this a little bit in the method, what they're doing with, data and crowdsourcing and that kind of thing.
Thanks, Maria. To me, I don't think the question is about privacy. I mean, privacy is self-evident, but I think it's, when you have to choose between privacy and health, it comes down to control. We don't have control of our health data. And in my wife's case, health trumped privacy. One thing I want to mention about privacy is sometimes, my experience in Canada is privacy is used as an excuse for control by some agents and not for progress. In Alberta, there's a common response I get from government, because we have a government-run health system, is we can't do that because of privacy. So they create paralysis. And this is also seen in the States in 2020, when Judith Falker, CEO of Epic, opposed rules to make data sharing easier in the name of privacy. The irony is, if you look at other industries, we do share our data, we still protect privacy. So it can be used as an excuse not to improve health.
Thank you, Shanil. Jeanette, what do you think about on this sort of crazy concept?
I wanted to start with the Belmont Principles, which probably many people are familiar with. When I think about data ethics and ethics more generally, I really need a framework to kind of start with. And I feel like, especially for the healthcare domain, at least we have the Belmont Principles to go back to. It may be that they need to be updated, given that data is easier to collect and disseminate in this digital age. But when you think about ethical questions and principles, these principles are there to help us have this debate. There's no right or wrong, yes or no, true or false answer. So with respect to the Belmont Principles, there's 3: respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. Your question of privacy, and ethics for healthcare really, I think, falls under beneficence, where you have to weigh, is the value that one gains by, for instance, sharing data or giving up privacy worth the benefit for doing that? There's a trade-off you have, and I think when Shanil talks about control, he means the individual has the right to make this decision. It's not in the hands of someone else to decide what the trade-off is for this particular piece of data, for this particular task at hand or purpose of using the data. So I think if we go back to first principles in some sense, then they can clarify how to even think about these questions and remind us that there's no right or wrong answer sometimes. And in this case, it is, does the benefit outweigh the risk?
So if I may just add to this very quickly, and that is, I absolutely agree with Jeanette, but another question that we should be asking is, for whom are these the benefits and for whom are these the risks, right? There are very often trade-offs between the different stakeholders and their needs and the benefits and the risks to them. And so we have to be very explicit to name these stakeholders and to make sure that they are part of the conversation, actively part of the conversation. And this then links to the thoughts that I hope I left you with on the need to educate various stakeholder groups about what we're doing with their data and what benefits they may be deriving and what are the risks to them.
Great, thank you. And Deepak, what do you think about this?
Thank you. I think I will be honest and say I don't really like the question because I believe it tends to think that there is a binary choice here between taking no risk and taking a huge amount of risk. And I don't think that's a reflection of the reality of people who are heterogeneous. They're not a single homogeneous set. If we are going to be respectful about this topic, we need to be respectful that people have different views about the extent they want to prioritize knowledge discovery versus safeguarding their own identity religiously and robustly. So our moral stance has to be to help people to understand the choices, but then allow them to exercise their choice, not for us to try to label them. Anyway, that's my view.
Thank you. I love when I have the disruptors in my panel. and finally, Dr. Peel, how about you? I know this is a very passionate topic, so definitely love to hear your insight about it. Is Dr. Peel on mute? Oh, do we lose her?
Maybe.
She's on mute there. Okay, well, let me see. Oh, we lost her, I guess, unfortunately, but that's how we're living in the new virtual world, thanks to the new norm. So with that, it's exactly 12 o'clock. I want to say, yes, I was able to have this panel finish on time. Woohoo! And I want to thank all our panelists for their great insight, their time. If you have any questions that we didn't get to in the chat or they're starting to come up now, I would like you to definitely join us on the Slack channel. I started posting some of my questions in the Slack channel already, just to start the conversation not only with our panelists, but amongst yourselves, and obviously keep the ideas going. So Florence, I'm going to hand it over to you now to take us into breakout land and get everybody to start thinking on a more defined topic and getting to some solutions and outcomes.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Maria. And thank you to our incredible panel. It's great hearing all your wonderful perspectives and the range of them so we can think about all these topics we're about to go into for the breakout. So now we're going into breakout sessions, and Christina from IEEE has graciously helped us get to that point. And I really want to thank our facilitators and advisors for each of the breakouts. Trust and Identity Technology Solutions will be led by Dr. Emily L. Spratt from Columbia University and Dr. Maud Anwar from North Carolina A&T State University. And we have our students that are going to be helping in each of these sessions. Privacy by Design will be led by Dr. Nada Phillip from Kingston University London and Parthiv Shah from Cerner Corporation. Patient-informed consent will be led by Dr. Shane Chang, Director of Data Science at Novartis, and Shanil Pathak, who you've heard from today, CEO and co-founder of Xamplo. And then ethical considerations for connected healthcare will be led by Dr. Becky Inster, a neuroscientist, as well as Dr. Fru Garamani from NJ Edge. So Christina is going to send us to our breakouts, and you will be in there with your student. The student is going to hit the record button so that we can record each of these breakout sessions so that we can use them on demand later. And they're also going to be putting notes in the Google Doc, and we're going to be using that for our final report. So, Christina, I think we're ready. Any questions? Very lively discussions, very thoughtful, very deep. I love this crowd. Great job. And so, Christina, do we have everybody back?
Yes, all of the breakout rooms are closed.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I know some of you came in like mid-breakout room. So I'm Florence Hudson, and I'm one of the co-leaders of this workshop today, along with my colleague, Maria Palombini from IEEE. And we're very grateful to IEEE for hosting us and creating the website and all this great work that you've all done. Thank you so much, Christina and Christian, who's behind the scenes, and all of our great students who helped in the breakout sessions. We really appreciate it, and all the facilitators and panelists and participants. So what we'd like to do now is I'll share my screen again. We're going to go into our breakout readouts. And I know you had very thoughtful discussions. So I think what we'd like to do is ask you to spend 10 minutes giving us a little update on what you came out with, kind of a high-level view, any specific issues you'd like to bring up. If there are any codependencies that came up, like you were talking about one of the other breakout teams, and you want them to know what you were thinking, that's fine too. And I'd ask the students who are still participating if you could also take some notes. That would be great. You could put it, at the bottom of your of the place that you were already taking notes, or another place so that we can pull it all together later. So thank you for that. So if group number one would be willing to, Emily and Maude, would you be willing to go first? Is that okay?
Maude, would you like to kick this off? I feel like I was very vocal in the session, so maybe give you a little chance to speak some more. Would you like to kick it off? Okay, well, I guess I'll get started then.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay,
Oh,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you go ahead, please.
Okay. So yes, we had a very good discussion on identity and trust, that at least we understood that they are so much interconnected, and based on the identity of individuals and devices and processes, we kind of feel comfortable and uncomfortable in terms of trust, even though we do not have a lot to say and we have to accept. So I don't know how we express our trust, but in these interconnected healthcare systems, but we have definitely, we feel that the identity kind of give us the sense of trust that we have. We talked about that there are different kind of barriers and people that they are not well represented in terms of the different experiences they have in terms of what they trust. We talk about that even not only those, your identity is no longer just human, all those different devices you carry, and sometimes those devices you kind of, we were given that example of this COVID situation, when your oxygen pump is shared, you no longer using it. So now the identity of the device is transferred to somebody else. So in that kind of scenarios, you are not sure who is representing those devices. So it's not only you are representing yourself, you're also representing devices. And then the processes are, and sometimes there's identity broker. You have one identity you are trying to use in multiple situations and scenarios. Those are also issues. We talked about the gaps, and in terms of gaps, we say that is that, there is, we feel very less, we're not empowered enough to even understand the issues and the gaps that we some way we feel that users thinking has to be what kind of issues they face, that we need to record them, we need to capture that. We thought about having maybe surveys. It's a socio-technical issues, so we need to represent the social aspect of it, not only just the technical, and then how we kind of combine them, we're not sure of. So that's what I capture. I would have you, Emily, better represent the other parts.
And Maude, I think that was an excellent summary. I just would add on to it, Florence's wonderful idea within our workshop to come up with a survey, both for the technical audience associated with the issue of trust and identity technology solutions for connected healthcare, but also for a more general audience. And we discussed a little bit how useful it would be to start creating a record about perceptions as to where these things stand right now, that we could then use in making our recommendations for what we need to do to address these things on a policy level. And we also floated the idea of maybe repeating a survey over time to get some helpful benchmarks as to how this is growing, as perception in this area is evolving rapidly. And the other thing that came up that Maude didn't already mention was that we talked about the role of emerging technologies and perceptions around emerging technologies. And again, I think that the idea of innovation about them also gets to the core issue of, again, what Florence underscored, which is how do you basically put flexibility into our recommendations so that innovation can still happen, but at the same time, we can have a model for emergency scenarios. So those are the only additional items I would add, but I think that this sort of sets the groundwork definitionally for the other breakout sessions. So thank you so much.
Excellent. Great job. Is there anybody else who was in that breakout session who wants to add anything? We're an egalitarian type of crowd.
I just maybe I will ask Craig, did you want to say anything? Because you made some excellent points that sort of carried throughout our conversation in the workshop.
Well, I think you captured it quite well across the board in terms of the key points, and both from the the establishment of trust between different systems, the emerging technologies, and what is the ultimate impact and perceptions of the stakeholders, the actual patients and other contributors, the users of that system, in terms of, can I trust the device? Can I trust my, that my privacy is being maintained? Will any information that is somehow collected work against me and be a bias, a prejudice for other things, whether it's acquiring financial assistance, whether it's a perception of, hey, I shared information that was very personal, and now it seems like the world, it could potentially know about that now.
Very interesting points. Thank you for that. Excellent. Wonderful. So thank you very much. And thank you, Haruki, for taking notes during this session. He's one of our students at Columbia. Haruki, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself for a minute.
Hi. Yeah, I guess I don't have too much to say, but it was great. Yeah, well, a student at Columbia, sophomore studying computer science. Yeah, really interesting to see different perspectives. Especially found, I think someone mentioned an article about someone getting like a brain implant that would like detect, epileptic seizures. I thought that was very interesting, and the implications that has on, how like a literal device, that you're forced to interact with, has on your identity. And that, like, along with, other things, very interesting to, listen to and take notes about. So thank you.
Thank you, Haruki, and thank you for taking notes. We really appreciate it. Excellent. Okay, great. Now we'd like to go on, and thank you very much, Emily and Maud. Now we'd like to go to privacy by design. If you're ready, Nada and Partha, and I think Mary was co-leading it with you. And Abhishek, I think, were you their fearless note taker? And Abhishek, why don't you just introduce yourself too?
Of course. Hi everyone, my name is Abhishek. I'm also with Columbia, and I'm currently a master's in data science student at the Data Science Institute. I also work with the Big Data Innovation Hub with Florence, Haruki, and all these amazing people. And thank you so much for letting me take notes for the discussion today. It was absolutely amazing to be part of it, and extremely enlightening to hear all of your views on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhishek. Excellent. And so Nada or Mary?
Nada, you want to go first, and then I can do.
Okay, then. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. So we discussed privacy by design. We started it by defining it, and in basic terms is basically making sure when you design a product or a system, making sure it's privacy preserved, in every aspect of that design throughout the life cycle and so on, and making sure that with that you are making sure that you're complying with the data privacy law in different countries and so on, with their fundamental requirements and principles. And I think the point that came out is like we looked at it from the point of view of the manufacturer and the end user, and maybe there are some third party involved to make sure that privacy by design is being followed in a particular service. The main thing that came across in terms of risks or challenges and gaps, there is because of the complexity added in terms, like for example, if you are a manufacturer and started designing something, and if you include the privacy requirement in addition of the functional requirement that you have there, this is kind of looked at as another level of complexity, and there could be like some sort of resistance by the manufacturer to follow these principles, and they think that let's develop something and get it out of the way as a product or a system, and then we will think about adding that later on. And there is the issue also about okay, we have the law, the GDPR or HIPAA or California Act, but how do you convert these into technical requirement? Like, how do you embed these into your design? How do you translate these? There is no, like, for example, a standard or a guidelines for a normal developer to follow. There is this complex requirement that you need to understand in terms of consent or purpose limitation and so on. And so there is an issue of, like, for a simple developer, how do you understand, for example, data retention? How long do you put the data and so on? How do you translate it? There should be a need for further guidelines for that. Yeah, and I'm just trying to think of other aspects. Parthi, do you want to add, or Mary, do you like to add things into that?
Let Mary go first, and I'll add. So.
No, I think that's a good description of what we discussed. I'm not a healthcare expert, but what I do know a lot about is product development and building for privacy for individuals, and also doing a lot of usability studies for them. And I think that I would just say this: there's an extreme level of discomfort by individuals about all systems because of the way that we've architected them and the way that we build them to hold all the information. And so I guess I would simply leave the general group with the notion that if we did a better job with this, the system would work better for individuals, but it would work better for those of us who are builders, because I think by withholding and being distrustful of the system, individuals are not fully participating. So everything is broken. It's not just broken for the individual, it's broken for development and companies.
Very interesting. Is there anybody else? Parthiv, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I need to say just a few things. So it's a great discussion, I think, and we got some great ideas. One thing which is very clear is what was spelled out from mitigation perspectives: education for developers and also for users, in terms of advocacy for users, what to expect, what not. Other point raised again was data aggregation. Too many things lying all over the place. So is there one place where you as a consumer, as a user, can go to and say, this is what I've signed, this is what has been done with it, and where it's been disclosed, right? So that's something we're struggling with. And there should be a broad consent agreement. The other area is also to track that data as to where its journey it goes, who uses it. And I think those were the most important things. So I think if we educate people and then both the developers and define it well enough, then at least we mitigate some risk, know what to expect and know what to track, so you can take control over it. So.
All excellent points. Nada, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I think we had some other discussion. Maybe Peter or Son, if you want to add any other points, please feel free to talk. Maybe we missed something from the discussion.
Peter here, I'll pop in. Peter. It was an excellent discussion, and I think the folks who were attending were obviously very experienced in designing for privacy and with privacy. As Parthiv was saying, one of the things we talked about around mitigation was how to educate what could be done and what the consumers should expect, and also to educate the developers as to what the benefit to the developer is to implement this. And from our personal experiences, and I brought mine to the table as well, that it's sometimes mystifying to those of us who know about privacy by design that you wouldn't want to start off by talking about privacy, because when you have to talk about it 5 months in, it's going to be a much more difficult and expensive conversation.
That's a very good point. That's one of the opportunities in developing standards, is to, have a guidebook basically of, what should be done. And as we develop it, develop the different standards, like in the TIPS working group, I know a number of you involved in that. We talk about brownfield and greenfield, the stuff that's already out there, privacy by design. It's wonderful if you can think about it way at, at the IP of the design of the chip before you even get it into a device and then you're using it somewhere, but there's stuff out there already. And so what are some of the things that we can do to kind of retrofit privacy by design, which is even more difficult, as you're saying, Peter. So thank you for bringing that up. So we are trying to get people to worry about it way up front. And there are a lot of way up fronts. There's the hardware, there's the software, there's the provider, there's, there are all these different things going on. And so this has been such a rich discussion. I really appreciate all of your points of view. Very valuable as we move forward. Any other comments from the privacy by design family?
Wish we had more time, but that's another session too.
We can always have more sessions. Well, that's why we're having a series of these sessions, and we bring stuff from one to the other, and then we can figure out where we go from here. And for people, as you know, Partha, that want to do this even more often, they can join the working group, which is free. You don't have to be a member of anything. So just let us know. Excellent. Okay, let's move on to patient-informed consent. And I think we have the two names that match. It was so easy for me to remember. I want to thank you, Shane and Chanel, for having the first 5 letters of your names being exactly the same, so I could remember who was with whom. And I'd also like to ask Macy and Huang, who were your student facilitators, your note takers, to introduce themselves. Macy and Huang, if you're there, you want to say hi and introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes, I can go ahead first. My name is Macy. I'm Lebanese and I'm a grad student at Columbia studying industrial engineering. I've been with the Hub for a few months now, working on this project and then a few others in data science. And I really loved this breakout. Thank you to Shanil and Jane for leading the conversation, and to Huang for helping. And as you're gonna hear from Shanil and Shane, I really enjoyed how we went beyond, the checklist of patient-informed consent, from what we should do to how do we make sure that the patient understands their rights and their what they're entitled to. So yeah, thank you.
That's wonderful. And Macy has been helping us with all of these webinars, so thank you so much for all of that. And all the students are wonderful, Abhishek and Macy and Huang and everyone else that you're going to get to meet, and Haruki. Huang, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi everyone, I'm Huang, and I'm doing my master's degree in data science at Columbia, and I just joined the Hub 2 weeks ago, and still getting used to all of the amazing information. And thank you. I want to say thank for our speaker and panelists who was sharing all of the invaluable information for us. And I look forward to the next workshop. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Huang. Okay, so Shane and Chanel, take it away. Tell us what you all learned, what you figured out, the questions or the answers, or both.
Thanks, Florence. I'll speak about the risks, and Shane's going to talk about the solutions. So to give context, we have about 13 people in an engaging group. People came from North America, Switzerland, Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, Lebanon, Taiwan, and a few other countries. So what surfaced from that global group is the complexities of patient consent. It's a global challenge, not easy to fix, and so there's several layers in the onion. So we talked about the complexities because of the different national laws and capabilities from these governments. Then we also looked into local languages. I mean, Canada, we have 2, and that's already complex enough. There's others who have far more local and like rural and main languages. Then the other layer of complexity with patient-informed consent was the diversity in education and also motivation, interest to be aware of what consent is. And then we thought of how can technology be used to solve these, and that's one thing we found is no matter, be it like we have people speaking from Congo, Rwanda, and also Switzerland, and us from North America, is that we're all trying to use technology in some fashion to solve this. So some of the challenges we had, or the risks that we highlighted, is the distributed nature of the collectors of data, the users of data, and the patients. And often there's no direct link to those three stakeholders. The other challenge we identified is the difficulties in the consent process. So, what was highlighted is that, I mean, there's consent in terms of the language, as we mentioned, and what does consent mean. But then there's also what we call a semantic interoperability. So the definition and the interpretation. So an example was about pain. What does pain mean here, like in one country versus another country, like these definitions. And then in summary, we come back to education is about understanding what patient is consenting to, especially how do you, because a lot of people may think locally, but we're global, right? Coming back to the distributed nature of data collection. So those are the kind of the paint the picture of the risks. There was a lot more risks that were identified. We distilled it to these. I'm going to hand it to Shane to talk about some of the solutions.
Yeah, thank you, Shanil. So in terms of solutions, we first identify different parties, main players in this setting. The first one will be governments. As you know, this is a global challenge to have patient consent, especially during the connected health, modern connected health technology era. And we have patients beyond the boundaries. So we need to have not only your government, but all the governments work together so we can have well-defined laws, rules, regulations, and collaborate each other. The second major party is the companies. The companies here, we refer to many categories. For example, the pharmas, device manufacturers, software developers, payers, hospitals, healthcare providers. Yeah, because they have more power to, they have also more resources to reach the patient consent. Especially this company usually have the power to collect data. And so this like a second party will be important in this, in providing the solutions. The third party will be patients. Patients are actually just individuals who whose data will be collected by some companies. So we need to have the three parties really work together. So first, in terms of the government, so government should set up some like policies, regulations, and also in terms of the public health level, they should provide the education as much as possible so that the patients or the general public are aware of what the patient's rights will be. Of course, the governments are also the actors. They're not only the third-party information provider or education provider, but they also can act something. But we know the governments are very slow, and it's not very easy to have governments to take any step further. So we also hope the company is able to take the more responsibilities as well. So companies usually would like to launch some studies or deploy their products. So we want to have the companies really think carefully about the protocols, about what will be the study about, what will be the product about, what will be the software, what will be the data collection mechanism. They need to define the protocols very well in the beginning. So once the product is deployed or the study is launched, then we know how to engage with the patients to get the patient consent and how to communicate with the patient to let the patient know their rights, their data collection process, and even the product of the data analysis. So we can use many different technologies. As we know, we have the smartphone available, mobile devices available, but we can have a language processing technology to help the patient consent being implemented in the local language, which may consider like local cultures or local regulation. So the consent should be complying with the laws. And we also need to provide a reasonable background information so the patients know what the study is about, what the software is about, what the device is about, what kind of data they will be being collected. Of course, we not only use like a like text, like a verbal, but also can use infographics, so that will be easily understandable by the patients. And last point is about the incentives. We know we can have a technology, we can have a policy, but hopefully the government also can provide incentives. So all the players inside this industry can really have a motivation to do the things right. Okay, I will stop here and then return to Florence.
That was so content rich. I love content. Thank you so much, Shane and Shamil. That was great. You know, spoken like a true data scientist, let's use some visualization so the patients know what they're consenting to. I really like that. So thank you for bringing all those points up. Are there any comments or questions from the people that were in the session or from others on the topics they discussed? Okay, great. Then we are right on time. Look at us, we're good. So now we'd like to go to the ethical considerations group. And I think we have Faru and Becky and Deepak who were co-leaders of that. And I don't know if Benji is still on the call, but Benji was our student. And I really want to thank him for his great work. He's an undergraduate at Columbia as well.
Thank you. I'll start and Deepak and Becky will jump in. Please feel free to jump in anytime. We started the discussion on defining connected healthcare. What does it mean? And what kind of information can I gather so that I can create outcome in healthcare? How can we use connected technology to come up with diagnosis? Then we also talked about the fact that the devices, the way they work together, all of the data has to be gathered and integrated for it to be useful. One of the challenges is that the clinicians may look at the data from siloed perspectives. So integrating that data is really important to provide a holistic view. And then we also talked about paperless healthcare, the importance to have the flow of information and having patients access the information is really vital. Sometimes your specialist may not get the information in a timely manner. It might take 2 weeks for them to go and access it. Whereas if the patient has access right away, then they can take action. We also discussed the importance of security, assuming the patient or the users assume that security is embedded in there in how the data is being protected. And so that's an important consideration as we're developing the technology to collect the data. The fact that we have all been more dependent on electronics during the pandemic, we talked about, adoption. Users getting used to using the electronic information that's available and electronically. And so we determined that because of what has happened in the last year and the dependency, there may be more easily, more openness to adopting. So getting data access to EMRs across the US, some of the challenges are they don't always talk to each other. The records are all separate in different formats. And then some of the issues surrounding that, for example, in mental health, the patient has to retell painful stories based on who the provider is. If you need health, care across the country, you have to retell your story. Lack of connectivity in healthcare results in disjointed care sometimes. Patients aren't empowered in knowing that wherever they go, they have access to their information. We talked a lot about data interoperability in the US. I mean, anywhere. If you make a mistake in collecting or basically providing the data into the technology, you can make a mistake, you can lose data. Some legislation can help to a certain extent. However, what's happening is that EMR vendors are all different, and they're not making it easy in having some standards and interoperability. We also talked about in Europe, there are no single standards. However, legally, everyone should have access to the data. As in Spain, they're working on a portal to allow individuals to get access to their data, and technology is available for users to download the data in various formats. There's definitely, what has definitely changed is that we are being shown a lot more than before in certain clinical areas. So for example, you go to a dentist and they may take more time to show the details of the images that they have. When linking the data, it can add increased challenges around bad actors. Cybersecurity is an important aspect, and it was pointed out that there's a big area to really focus in on is specifically mental health and cybersecurity space. We talked a lot about privacy and trust, and we focused in on how there may be some differences based on the region, based on your cultures, based on where you are internationally. And so, for example, with regard to trust in the data, and there was an observation that was made that in the European at the European level, they're still wondering if the data can be trusted. However, in the US, or from organization perspective, government, it seems that there is more of a trust in the data. We also discussed second opinion, how there can be some strong cultural differences on getting a second opinion. And some of the comments that were made was it depends on public-private options, where you live, based on what the diagnosis is. So for cancer, you're more apt to go and get a second opinion. And then there is a difference in that in the US, you can choose healthcare systems, public, private. However, in Europe, it's more homogeneous healthcare that's provided to all. Data such as, the COVID, we talked about COVID and how its impact in the employment area, and employers requiring that you have your vaccination as it relates to travel. And then the consequence of, manipulating the data and providing a card that says you have been vaccinated. We also discussed some of the mitigation strategies and recommendations. Guidelines are necessary. Having authorities in the healthcare delivery system to focus in on this type of discussion like we are today, actually. And although a code of ethics doesn't need to be, set in stone rules, it can provide some important guidelines. Then some HIPAA Interoperability Act in the US provides guidance asking EMR vendors to make data available in a specific format. The challenge is that there's resistance in the market. There's a lot of pushback in the industry. People want access to the data so that they can feel empowered and they want to be able to have, one of the things that they want to have is for the data to be able to provide them with alerts on what they should be doing, some guidance. But then on the other end, we also talked about how all these different alerts from sensors and different devices and things can be intrusive and can impact the patient's autonomy and freedom. And I think that was all that I had. We also talked about disclosing information about providers and how it's important to be able to have information about different providers and be able to provide that to the users. And there was some discussion around algorithms that can do that.
Well, that was a lot. Thank you, Faru. Thank you. Great. And Deepak or Becky, anything you want to add?
Well, I think you've gathered from Faru's excellent walkthrough of the topics that we had a really rich discussion and we covered a lot of topics. I think there's probably only a punchline remark I've made because I don't think there's any more to add. But what I hope you've picked up from her description is that the ethical issues, which is what we were supposed to be tasked with relating to connectivity, are really rather small compared to the ethical issues with non-connectivity or with patchy or badly designed connectivity. In other words, if we get connectivity right, there are only a limited number of ethical issues that really become dominant. And the ethical imperative for us is not to get hung up on those, but to correct the ethical woes that we are in the middle of right now through non-connectivity. I mean, that was my take home from the session. Get on with it, because you're doing more harm than good by not connecting today. And I think, Faru, would you agree that that's kind of if you took all of your explanation, all of the different topics, if you had to weigh them on a scale, left and right, would you concur with that?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Is that we're not far along. We need to be connected and we need to have the data be able to talk to each other.
Absolutely. And I think, Florence, I'm sorry that Becky is, I think, no longer on the call because she had a personal matter to rush to.
Okay. That's okay. Well, thank you all. That was excellent. And you're making me think, Deepak, that there were charts I used to use, slides I used to use a few years ago, and there was a gentleman that I quoted where he said, "We've killed more people because we didn't share data than because we did."
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right. And he's a chief medical officer. So it's true. It's the data you don't have. The allergies, like you were talking about, the list of allergies. I'm allergic to thimerosal, any sulfa sulfite type of thing. Celebrex has it, who knew? You know, and I would talk to a doctor and they'd say, it's not in my Palm Pilot. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you just said that to me, right? So they don't have access to this information.
Yeah, but also what
scary.
it means, but actually with something that's a little bit esoteric like that, it's not like saying I'm allergic to penicillin, where most clinicians prescribing an antibiotic would know if it's penicillin related or not. That could be a verbal exchange and you'd get away with it. Something a bit esoteric needs computerized decision support. And you're not going to get that unless the data is inside your system in a computable form. It can't be narrated by the patient in real time. Sadly enough, it's not going to be good enough.
Yeah, I actually had to go
save
back.
your life or protect you. Yeah.
Yeah. I got very sick after I was in China about 10 or 12 years ago. And I came back and we couldn't figure it out. Nobody could. And they put me on a couple of meds. I went anaphylactic, ended up in the hospital. I went back and saw that doctor who prescribed those medicines. And I said, I came back to talk to you so you don't do this to somebody else.
Right. Oh, it was anaphylactic. You were actually in hospital with it.
Oh, I was, yeah. So
Okay,
I went back and,
serious. Yeah.
paid for another appointment to go see her and say, don't do that to anybody else.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, there are a lot of issues out there. I actually think that allergies are one of the reasons people don't wake up. Sometimes they wonder what happened. They could have taken something, but nobody knows. Anaphylaxis, right? So,
Florence, I need to add one thing, if you're done, just very quickly, is
sure.
One point which I didn't bring up in my discussion, which I think applies across the board, is simplify. And the information is not being simplified when it's given to people. Even how many people read the discharge papers? How many even people read the consent forms? Nobody does today, right? So one of the topics came up is, can we simplify things for people in this sense? And I think that should be across the board, I think, right?
I think that's
there is a challenge, though. I think it's a brilliant question, but it's a challenge. It's interesting. I'm involved in a project that started just a few months ago in Europe, and it's going to run for 5 years. So we've got a big job to do, which is to look at the medication information. The package insert, the little tiny font, hand lens only. You can't read it with a naked eye. That comes in your drug box. How can we turn that into something really usable by patients? And that it's not just about translating the document into a PDF. That's not really going to help. It's just full of legally protective stuff. So how can we help people to know what's pertinent to them? What are the headlines they need to really watch for versus the 10,000 words of protective material that's in the text? But, and this is to your point, there is a legal issue that if we were to filter it and say, here are the 3 side effects you need to know about, we're hitting a really legal issue, complicated issue. So what we have to do is to look carefully at how we highlight things, but the reader, the patient can always see the full detail. And what you're saying about discharge summaries and clinical letters is exactly the same. We need to find a way of saying, here's the stuff you probably are most interested in, but in case we've got it wrong, you just click once and you see the whole thing properly. So I think what you're saying is right. We need to figure out a balance between relevance and completeness. And it's a little bit sophisticated. It's beyond my pay grade to figure it out, but it's within my pay grade to say it.
So I'll give a very simple example, right? How many people on this panel today have issue with trying to figure out what the expiration date is on your medications? If you look at times, you can't figure out where it is. You're looking for it. It's tiny as heck. God, if you're magnifying glass, you're up the creek, right? So simple things which we just don't think about, right? How it impacts. That would apply principles.
You're completely right.
Across the board, right? So.
And then there's what I call the what and the so what. So what's the expiration date, right? What's the expiration date? But so what? Like, my son will say, oh my gosh, this Tylenol expired last month. I'm like, seriously? I mean, there's like no half-life issue here. It's not like we're talking about uranium, so I think that people need to, I think a practical point of view is wise too.
I think if you're dealing with a tin of baked beans, do you have baked beans on the other side? I think they were invented in the other.
We do have baked beans. This is an interesting discussion, but we do.
If you have a if you have a tin of baked beans and it's 3 months old, but actually it had an 8-year life when it was packaged, you're probably all right. But the trouble is, if you take a medicine that's outside its expiry date, all of your legal protections vanish, as far as I know. So I think it is a little tricky. You don't probably want to sue Heinz. So I'm assuming Heinz also is your baked bean provider of.
We have B&B. We have a few options. You know, it's a competitive market here.
Sorry, I don't want to really get into the culinary, but you know what I mean. You're unlikely to sue them if you open a tin of beans and after 3 months after its expiry date you feel a bit unwell. You're unlikely to go to court. So I think but this is all part of the game. We've got to get this right. You're right in your statement, Florence, about the need to say the what and the so what. But the so what can sometimes not be as simple as it looks.
You're absolutely right. Thank you very much for that perspective. Chanel, were you going to say something? I saw your lips moving.
I was come back
so I think one thing I don't hear in these discussions is how do we leverage the solutions from other industries?
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
All of this stuff has been, we don't need to reinvent this. So in terms of communication, you know, the consent or this thing, the prescription labels, etc. I worked in telecom. One of the biggest problems they had was bill rage. Not a big problem, but literally people would go into those shops with a bat because they were so upset with their bill, even though they signed it, they had a contract, they just didn't understand. Obviously, it's a very small fraction, but it was an issue. That was, I mean, that's an extreme case. But what I'm saying is the telecom industry took a contract that was complicated. It was a cell phone contract, had a lot of numbers in it, and they just put that infographics, which we talked about before. They forced all cell phone providers to have one standardized cover sheet, which had all the top information in plain English or French, I mean, and underneath it was the detailed contract. And that became standard no matter who the provider is. And then your bills became, rather than numbers, because it's known that people don't understand numbers, like as in 50% versus 90%, what does that really mean? They converted all that to colored infographics as a solution. So it's been done, right? So when you go look at a clinical study and you have to sign it, who reads that? You have to read it, but that's just a lot of the solutions in health, a lot of solutions we need in healthcare have already been solved in other industries.
That makes sense. So how did that happen in telco? Was there like the top three, I don't know who they are, but the top three got together and decided to do it, everybody followed? Or was there, you know, a consortium, an industry consortium that did it? Was it Addis? Do you know how it happened?
I mean, yeah, we have the regulator plus I'm sure an industry association in combination created this, but it was a political drive to force the hand of these companies.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
A political drive.
Yeah, it became law.
Oh, I see. It was policy. Oh,
policy.
Yeah, in the U.S., when we say it's political, we mean nobody will agree with each other.
oh,
it's a different translation.
There you go.
Sorry, we'll have to take that out of the video. But yeah, that means something different. I'd like to ask one more question before we get into the next steps. Earlier, somebody mentioned that we have to kind of normalize what we mean by certain terms. And I feel like somebody said the word like explaining what we mean by pain. Is that different based on where you are on the planet?
Yeah, that came from my group. I wonder if the gentleman is here. I can't see if who mentioned it. I think he left.
Okay.
It was a gentleman from Europe mentioned it as the definition of these semantics. So I mean, I appreciate that statement because with Zamplo, we allow you to log anything, and then to make it clinically relevant, they need to know, okay, what is this data actually consistent? So rating a pain from 0 to 10 could be subjective, or you could actually put instruments in there. So that's an example where
Okay.
Or what are those standardized instruments? Like, what does 0 mean versus 10?
And it could mean different things to different people, right?
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Because Florence, if you don't baseline it, your pain is different than my pain.
Well, how do you baseline it though?
You can't, but that's the whole thing.
Yeah,
Because we all have different thresholds for pain. So my 3 could be your 5, right? So
it could be. Yeah. Very interesting. I love when people make us think like that. Was somebody else trying to speak? Kate, was it you? I feel like you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I did want to make a comment when you were talking about the little bits inside your medication.
Right.
And we talked about expiry dates and other things. One of the things that's cropped up in the UK is that when you are having regular prescriptions, the pharmacist is supposed to use the same supplier. But in fact, that can be critical in some endocrine situations, as we have discovered. And if a consultant wants a particular thing, it's really difficult to get that particular brand supplied all the time.
That makes sense. I can see that. I know I'll get something, my prescription. I'm like, this looks different, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're always doing that. But then to be told only one of them is the one you can take and you can't get it within the next 3 counties, it's difficult.
Very difficult. So how is that resolved, or is it not?
It isn't really resolved. We have my daughter has to cope with what she gets, which is why she's still under the endocrine clinic 10 years later, because it can't be properly controlled.
Boy, all these things we have to fix. Good thing we're worrying about them and putting them on the table. Sounds like, Maria, we're going to have more meetings to figure all this stuff out.
Yes, maybe one day they can be in person again too.
Oh, you think that when's that going to happen?
I don't know.
I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see.
So we've had all our readouts, and I think what we wanted to do next is to talk about where we go from here. So did you want me to project my screen?
Yes, please.
Sure, my pleasure. Can we see it?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Do you want to do it, or shall I?
You're doing. You're doing such a good job.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. This has been very insightful. We've captured a lot of content. We have the recording, so we can go back and check our notes. And then the recordings will be available online. And that should be in the next couple of weeks, I would say, is usually how we do it. We have a documented summary of the breakout sessions, and we'll pull them all together and make it available to all registered participants and attendees. And we'll notify you via email once it is published. I want to thank our great students who are helping us with that. Macy's been leading the pack on the prior ones. And so thank you, everybody, for that. And then we've actually already posted a link in the chat, I think, to complete the post-event evaluation survey. I think Maria or Christina did that already. And if you could please share your feedback with us. And invite your friends and family and your colleagues to register for the workshop series, and then they can view the on-demand and live broadcasts. And then if you would like to join us, Maria and I will be making an appearance virtually behind the screen in the Slack channel. And you can just scan this QR code if you want access to the Slack channel, or you could go to qrco.de.
And I also put a link in the chat as well.
Oh, you're wonderful.
For this as well.
Thank you so much. And so save the date. The next workshop is going to be the 16th of June, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern again, on data and device identity, validation, interoperability, and connected healthcare. We already have a few people who have offered to be on the panel, but if you know of somebody, please let us know. We do like to have an international crowd. We're very grateful that today we were able to have the EU, Switzerland, Africa, people from all over the planet. I think I saw Matsumoto-san, Ohio gozaimasu over there, maybe. Konbanwa. Konbanwa. And so we have people from Japan, and of course our panelists that included the EU, Canada, and the US, and our great facilitators and students. So we do like to have a very global perspective so that we come up with global solutions. Whether you stay in a different place on the planet or you move around the planet. And then when we have to go to space, it'll be more complicated, but we're just going to stick here right now on the planet. And that's our current goal. And Maria, did you want to mention this?
Thank you.
Sure. So just to let you all know, WAMI is how Florence and I first got a little more acquainted. And WAMI is our industry connections program on wearables and medical IT and interoperability and intelligence. So it's pretty much covering many of the topics we talked about today around cybersecurity, but as well looks at interoperability, looks at communications protocols, the seamless bioinformatics highway for the future of mobilized care using these devices. So it's a pretty more expansive topic, and we do a whole bunch of webinars on this. So obviously they're free, and we hope you can join us. And separately, we are going to be launching season 2 of the Rethink Health podcast series, which season 2 is all focused on global perspectives on cybersecurity and connected health. So to accompany this series, we have the podcast series going along as well. Season 2 should be coming out towards the middle of May, and we'll definitely keep you posted. But we're still interviewing experts from all over the globe. We have people from Africa, India, Europe, North America, Latin America. So we have really made it, Australia, we have really made it very, as much as we can, our global reach as far as we could. So hopefully you'll join us.
Excellent. And we need your feedback. Please give us your feedback, give us ideas, tell us you want to be a panelist, tell us you want to facilitate. Just please give us your input, because when we work together, we'll be able to solve this together. Mm-hmm. And that's it. So thank you, everybody. Any last comments or questions?
Well, this was really exciting, everybody. I echo Florence's comments. Thank you to our panelists, our facilitators, and obviously you, the audience. You guys are great, asking great questions, really putting yourselves in there with great ideas and discussions. And this is what makes this whole series really exciting.
Absolutely. And thank you to IEEE for hosting us, and Maria for your partnership, and Christian and Christina and everybody.
Absolutely. We love great partnerships, and we continue to moving forward with it for sure.
Absolutely. And Coco, you're here from Congo, Rwanda. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. Excellent.
All right.
Well, great. Then we're going to give everybody a couple of minutes back. Coco, did you want to say something?
Yes, I thank you very much. I thank everybody to be here and to give me this opportunity to be one of you. I thank very much Mr. Shani and everybody for the Brian's interventions. So I think I learned too much being here. I didn't do the mistakes to come here. It's the right place. It's my right place. As I'm working already on that project, me and with my team, I built the system to interconnect all the health data in different towns in Congo. How you know, Congo is not a small countries, it's a big countries. And I didn't build the system only for Congo. I built the system for all Africa, all the Africa, including financial management, all the information, hospital management. So it's an ERP, a health enterprise resource planning, which not only deal with health problems, but which will deal with all the administration of the hospital, and including accounting system of every region of Africa. As you may know, that Kenya is not in the same accounting system with Congo, and or with Egypt, something like that. So we had working on everything like that. But the big problem now, it's more politics than techniques. It's more politics than techniques, but actually we are starting implementing in Burundi and in Congo. We have to see with both systems. I thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. For being here. I came here on the name of PCI. people-centered internet. And I'm involved in African Network Operators Group. Had worked for many internet service provider in Africa. So that is my job, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much, Mrs. Florence, Mrs. Shani, and everybody.
It was our pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us. Your voice is important. We're really glad that you share it.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, we're going to let you go on time. And it's really wonderful. And we hope to see you in the next session. Thank you, everyone, and be well. We'll be over in the Slack channel if you want to join us.
Thank you, everybody. Stay
Thanks. Bye-bye.
safe.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.